My name is Ava Morales. I am 32 years old, and I am from Albuquerque, New Mexico. The box arrived on a Tuesday that smelled faintly of rain and cardboard. The kind of ordinary afternoon that folds in on itself and disappears before you notice it happened. I remember the sound first, the dull, patient knock against my apartment door. Not urgent, not careless, just deliberate enough to make me pause with the kettle still whispering on the stove. I wasn't expecting anything. Bills came through email. Friends texted before visiting. The only packages I ever received were things I ordered late at night and forgot about by morning. Still, I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Beige carpet, flickering light, the distant hum of someone's television through a wall too thin to keep secrets. On the floor sat a small wooden box, darker than the cheap laminate around it, worn smooth at the corners like it had traveled farther than the building deserved. No label. No return address. Just my name, written in ink that had bled slightly into the grain. For a long moment, I didn't touch it. The kettle clicked off behind me with a soft metallic sigh, and the silence that followed felt heavier than it should have. I told myself it was a mistake, that someone on another floor was missing a delivery, that I should leave it where it was. Instead, I bent down and picked it up. The wood was cool. Real wood, not the hollow kind sold in craft stores. It smelled faintly of dust and something older cedar, maybe, or the inside of a closet that hasn't been opened in years. My fingers recognized the texture before my mind did, and a quiet unease moved through me like a draft under a closed door. I carried the box inside and set it on the kitchen table. Steam from the kettle curled upward, fogging the lower edge of the window. Outside, traffic moved slowly through the late afternoon light, tires hissing against damp pavement. Everything looked normal. Everything sounded normal. And yet the air in the room had shifted, subtle but undeniable, like the pressure drop before a storm. I told myself to open it quickly, the way you pull off a bandage. No thinking. No imagining. The lid wasn't locked. It lifted with a soft wooden click. Inside were three things: a photograph, a hospital bracelet, and a sealed envelope. I reached for the photograph first. The paper was thin and slightly curled at the edges. The colors faded into the soft yellow of age. It showed a backyard I recognized immediately, even before my eyes adjusted to the blur. A tire swing. Dry grass. The crooked fence my father always said he'd fix when the weather cooled. There were two figures in the picture. One was small me, maybe 5 years old, hair pulled into uneven pigtails. The other stood just behind, half turned away from the camera. A man's shape, broad shoulders. One hand lifted as if he'd been about to wave or shield his eyes from the sun. His face was cut off. By the edge of the frame, I stared at that missing space longer than I meant to, as if looking hard enough might pull the rest of him back into existence. My father had been dead for 16 years. That was the story. That was the fact everyone agreed on. Car accident. Rain-slick road. Instant. I set the photograph down carefully, like it might bruise. Next, the bracelet. Thin plastic, clouded with time, the clasp slightly bent. Hospitals have a particular smell, antiseptic, and something metallic beneath it, and even after all these years, the scent seemed trapped inside the band, faint but unmistakable. A name was printed on it. Not mine. The letters had faded, but they were still readable enough to send a slow, cold line down my spine. Beneath the name was a date, numbers I didn't recognize. Not my birthday. Not any birthday I knew. I swallowed, suddenly aware of how quiet the apartment had become. Even the traffic outside seemed distant, muffled, like I was listening from underwater. The envelope waited at the bottom of the box, plain cream-colored, sealed tight. My childhood home address was written across the front in careful block letters. Not the apartment I lived in now. The house we left behind when everything broke. Open and rearranged itself into the version of the past I'd learned to live with. My fingers hovered above it. "Don't open it," a small voice said. "Put everything back. Pretend this never arrived." For years, I had done exactly that with anything that hinted at before. One avoided old photographs, skipped certain streets when I visited Albuquerque, let my mother change the subject whenever my father's name drifted too close to the surface. Forgetting wasn't something that happened all at once. It was a slow agreement you make with yourself, one quiet compromise at a time, and I had been very good at it, until now, because the truth, the simple, undeniable truth, was that no one else could have sent this, which meant someone had kept it, hidden it, waited. My chest tightened, not quite panic, not quite grief, something older than both. The feeling you get when a memory moves in the dark just beyond reach. I pressed my thumb along the envelope's edge. The paper was brittle. It would tear easily. Instead of opening it, I pulled my hand back. I didn't know why. Maybe I was afraid that whatever waited inside would make the past real again, solid in a way I couldn't ignore. Maybe I understood, without wanting to admit it, that once I knew, I wouldn't be able to unknow. The kettle had gone cold. The room smelled faintly of damp paper and cedar. Somewhere upstairs, a child laughed, the sound bright and careless and completely separate from the weight. Sitting on my kitchen table, I picked up my phone and stared at my mother's name. We didn't talk often, birthdays, holidays, the occasional check-in that stayed politely on the surface, like two strangers careful not to ask the wrong question. Our conversations were full of weather and work and television shows neither of us actually cared about. Still, my thumb moved before I could stop it. The line rang longer than usual. When she answered. Her voice sounded thin, stretched tight over something I couldn't see. "Ava?" "Hi, Mom." My own voice felt unfamiliar, like I was borrowing it from someone calmer. "Did you send me something?" A pause, soft breathing. The faint clink of dishes in the background. "No," she said, too quickly. "Why would I? What do you mean?" I looked at the box, at the photograph, at the bracelet that carried a stranger's name. "I got a package," I said. "A wooden box, no return address." Silence filled the line, heavy and immediate. Not confusion. Not surprise. Recognition that something inside my chest shifted. Slow and irreversible, like a lock turning after years of rust. "Ava," she said quietly. "You shouldn't." She stopped. The unfinished sentence hung between us, fragile and sharp. "Shouldn't what?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, the way voices do when people step carefully around the truth. "It's probably nothing," she said. "Just throw it away." Throw it away. 16 years of not asking questions. 16 years of accepting the story exactly as it was given to me. 16 years of silence wrapped so tightly around our family that it felt like safety. And now the stop. My gaze drifted back to the envelope. Because he was supposed to be gone, the thought came uninvited, fully formed, carrying a weight I didn't understand yet. My fingers curled slightly against the table's edge, grounding myself. In the rough texture of cheap wood veneer, in the small ordinary details of a life that suddenly felt less stable than it had an hour ago. "Ava," my mother said again, softer now, almost pleading. "Let it be." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I imagined doing exactly that, sliding everything back into the box, carrying it down to the dumpster behind the building, listening to the hollow thud as it disappeared among broken furniture and black plastic bags, going back upstairs to my quiet apartment, my predictable job, my carefully edited memories. Peace, the fragile kind built on not knowing. When I opened my eyes, the envelope was still there, waiting. "I'll call you later," I said. "Ava," I ended the call before she could finish. The apartment felt different now, smaller somehow, as if the walls had leaned closer to listen. Outside, the rain had started again, soft against the glass, steady enough to blur the streetlights into pale halos. I sat down at the table. The envelope rested beneath my hand, light as paper should be, heavy as something that had been buried too long. For a long time, I didn't move. Then, slowly, I slid my finger under the brittle seal and began to open it. The paper tore with a sound softer than I expected, a dry whisper that seemed to settle into the room and stay there. Inside was a single sheet, folded once. No letterhead. No signature. Just a few words written in the same careful block handwriting as the address on the front. June 14th, 1999, 1418. Candelaria Road, bring the key. A small piece of metal slipped from the fold and tapped lightly against the table. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. It was an ordinary key brass, worn smooth along one edge, the grooves dark with age. The kind of key that opened something quiet, something meant to stay closed. June 14th, 1999. The date meant nothing at first. Then it did. I would have been 5. The same age as the girl in the photograph. A memory stirred, not clear, not complete, just a sensation. Heat on the back of my neck. The slow creak of rubber against rope. Someone laughing behind me, low and warm, just before thunder rolled in from the west. I pressed my fingertips against my eyes until small sparks of light bloomed in the dark. Stop, I whispered. Though I wasn't sure whether I meant the memories or myself, the address was familiar too. Not in the way you remember a place you visited, but in the way your body recognizes distance and direction without permission. Candelaria Road ran east to west across the city, cutting through neighborhoods that had changed names and faces over the years. I tried to picture the building. Couldn't. Just a blank space where certainty should have been. The rain outside thickened, each drop striking the window with a soft, steady rhythm. Time moved strangely inside that sound, stretching, folding. Refusing to behave normally, I looked back at the box, at the photograph and the bracelet and the note that had waited more than 2 decades to reach me. Someone had kept this. Someone had decided now was the moment, which meant something had changed. The thought settled into me with quiet precision. This wasn't an accident. I stood too quickly, the chair legs scraping against the floor with a harsh, unfamiliar noise. My apartment suddenly felt temporary, like a place I'd borrowed instead of lived in. The air smelled faintly metallic, the way it does before lightning. Without giving myself time to reconsider, I reached for my coat and my keys. The drive across Albuquerque felt shorter than it should have, as if the city had rearranged itself to hurry me somewhere I wasn't ready to go. Streetlights smeared across the wet windshield. Radio static hummed low and constant. Every red light felt like an interruption instead of a pause. I tried to remember June 1999, kindergarten, drawings taped to a refrigerator, purple sneakers that lit up when I ran, my father lifting me high enough to touch the ceiling fan while my mother pretended to scold him. Normal memories. Safe ones. Nothing about keys. Nothing about secret addresses. Nothing about bracelets with the wrong name. My chest tightened around the absence of those memories. The way it might around a missing stair you don't see until your foot falls through. Empty space. By the time I reached Candelaria Road, the rain had softened to mist. 1418 sat between a closed laundromat and a narrow insurance office with peeling blue paint. The building itself was low and rectangular, stucco faded to a tired beige. One dark window, one metal door. No sign. It looked less like a place people visited and more like somewhere things were stored and forgotten. I turned off the engine but didn't get out. The key rested in my palm, warm now from my skin, small, patient, certain. You can still leave, a quiet voice suggested. Drive home. Pretend you never came. My hand tightened around the metal until the edges pressed into my skin. For 16 years, leaving had been the only thing I knew how to do. Tonight, I opened the car door instead. The air outside smelled like wet concrete and distant sagebrush. Traffic moved somewhere far behind me, muted and unimportant. Up close, the door showed scratches near the lock, thin pale lines carved by years of use. Not abandoned then, just quiet. I stood there long enough for doubt to return in slow, careful steps. What if this meant nothing? What if I was about to open a door that led to dust and empty shelves, and the realization that grief can invent patterns where none exist? My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the key. It slid into the lock without resistance. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I turned it. The click was soft. Final. Inside. The air was cooler than outside, carrying the faint scent of paper and something medicinal long faded. I found a light switch by touch. Fluorescent bulbs flickered awake overhead, bathing the room in a pale, humming glow. It was an empty. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. A wooden desk sat near the back, its surface cleared too neatly. And against the far corner stood a cedar chest, dark, worn, unmistakably familiar. My stomach dropped with quiet certainty. I had seen that chest before. Not here. Somewhere older, somewhere that smelled like summer dust and attic insulation and the slow passing of years. I moved toward it without deciding to. Each step felt measured, as if the room itself were listening. The brass hinges were dull with age. A thin layer of dust coated the lid, except for one narrow streak. Across the top, recently disturbed. Someone else had been here. The realization didn't feel frightening. Not exactly. It felt expected. I knelt beside the chest, the concrete floor cold through the fabric of my jeans. For a long moment, I just rested my hand against the wood. It was warm. Not from the room. From memory, a sound drifted through my mind, muffled voices, urgent but hushed. My mother saying my name from far away. My father's voice lower, steadier, telling me to stay quiet, just for a minute. Just like a game. My breath caught halfway in. Stop, I whispered again. Weaker this time, the lid opened with a slow wooden sigh. Inside lay a stack of objects, arranged with deliberate care. A thin ledger bound in cracked leather. A folded hospital blanket, edges yellowed with time. And beneath them, a small cassette recorder. The sight of it sent a sharp, electric chill through my arms. No one keeps cassette recorders anymore. Not unless they're holding on to something they can't bear to lose. My hands hovered above the ledger first. The leather felt fragile, ready to split if handled carelessly. I opened it gently. Names filled the pages, dates, short notes written in tight, controlled handwriting. Not random, not meaningless. A record, halfway down one page. My eyes caught on a date I recognized immediately. June 14th, 1999. Beside it was a single line. Transfer completed. Child secured. The words blurred as something inside my chest folded inward, slow and silent. Like paper burning without flame. Transfer. Child. Secured. I shook my head once, sharply, as if the motion might rearrange the meaning into something harmless. It. DIDN. Single quotes. T. My gaze dropped lower on the page. Another entry, written days later. Accident reported. Identity preserved. The room tilted, not physically, but in the quiet internal way that makes the world feel suddenly unreliable. My father's accident. Identity. PRESERVED. A sound escaped me then. Small and involuntary. Somewhere between a breath and a break. I closed the ledger too quickly. The snap echoing softly in the fluorescent hum. For a few seconds, I just knelt there, palms flat against the cedar, trying to anchor myself to something solid, but solidity was exactly what was disappearing. Slowly, inevitably, my eyes moved to the cassette recorder. Dust coated the plastic surface. Except for the play button, clean, recently touched. A new awareness slid into place beside the others. Whoever sent the box, whoever had been here, they hadn't just wanted me to find this. They wanted me to hear it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the recorder. It was heavier than it looked, dense with the quiet gravity of stored voices. For a long moment, I couldn't press the button because sound is different from paper. Sound is alive, irrefutable. Once heard, it can't be folded closed again. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Rain tapped faintly against the distant roof. Somewhere in the city, a siren rose and fell. Unaware of the past opening in a silent room, I closed my eyes, then I pressed play. The tape hissed for a few seconds before the voice arrived out low, unsteady, familiar in a way that made my lungs forget their rhythm. Ava, the voice said softly, like the name itself might break. If you're hearing this, then I ran out of time to tell you the truth the right way. My fingers tightened around the edges of the recorder. The plastic creaked faintly under the pressure. It was my father. Not the memory of him. Not the soft aversion grief invents. His real voice, rough at the edges, threaded with warmth, carrying the quiet gravity of someone who already knows how the story ends. I wanted you to grow up safe, he continued. Safe means different things to different people. To me, it meant distance, silence, letting you believe something simple instead of something dangerous. A pause filled with faint background noise, air moving. Maybe a door closing somewhere far away in the past. You weren't the child they were looking for, he said. But you were close enough that it wouldn't matter to the wrong person. My mind tried to assemble the words into sense and failed. The tape clicked softly, then resumed. Your sister was born first, he said, and someone decided she belonged to them. Papers were signed. Money changed hands. Your mother and I ran before they could come back for you too. Sister. The word opened inside me like a door I had spent my whole life pretending wasn't there. We hid her, he whispered. Not to lose her, to keep her alive. Everything after that, the accident, the records, the names, it was the only way to make them stop looking. His voice shook then, just slightly. I'm sorry you had to carry the lie. I'm sorry I couldn't stay and explain it myself. The tape hiss grew louder, swallowing the silence around his last breath of sound. If you find this, he said finally, it means she's ready. And if she's ready, maybe we can all stop running. The recorder clicked. Silence rushed back into the room, heavy and complete. For a long time, I didn't move. Didn't breathe deeply. Didn't think in full sentences. Sister. The ledger. The bracelet. The transfer. The preserved identity. All of it rearranged itself into a shape I could finally see. Not abandonment. Not betrayal. Protection built out of impossible choices. A sound behind me soft. Human folded into the quiet. I turned. She stood in the doorway like someone unsure whether she was allowed to exist there. About my height. Dark hair pulled loosely back. Eyes that felt like looking into a mirror tilted slightly toward another life. For a second, the world narrowed to the space between us. No music. No revelation. Just two people breathing the same air after decades apart. You found it, she said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the years inside it. The waiting. The distance measured in birthdays missed and names never spoken. I nodded once, because anything more felt too fragile. We looked at each other the way strangers do when they already know something important. Studying details. Searching for proof. I didn't know if you'd come, she said. I didn't know you were real, I answered. A small, sad smile touched her mouth. Recognition. Not offense. That makes two of us. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. indifferent witnesses to a reunion that had taken half a lifetime to reach. She stepped closer, slow enough to stop if I pulled away. I did in single quotes, T-dot up close. The resemblance was undeniable. Not identical life had shaped us differently, but connected in the quiet. Architecture of bone and expression. I wanted to meet you when it was safe, she said. It just took longer than anyone planned. Is it safe now? I asked Dot. She considered that, eyes soft but honest, safe enough to stop hiding. The words settled gently instead of striking hard. Safe enough. Not perfect. Not repaired. Just possible, Dot, and somehow that felt more truthful than any promise. We stood there a moment longer, balanced on the edge of something new, Dot. Then she reached out, not dramatic, not desperate. Just a hand, open and patient in the space between us. I looked at it, the simple, human offering of connection, and felt the past loosen its grip by a single, quiet degree. I took her hand, warm, real. Here, Dot, something inside my chest shifted, not the sharp breaking I had expected, but a slow unlocking, like a door opening inward after years of being stuck. Neither of us cried right away. Some emotions are too large for tears at first, Dot. Instead, we stood in the hum of fluorescent light and distant rain, holding onto the fragile proof that the story hadn't ended where we thought it had. The weeks that followed were made of small, careful moments, conversations that circled the truth before landing on it. Photographs spread across kitchen tables, silences that no longer felt empty, just full of things still learning how to be said, Dot. There were practical consequences to records corrected, questions answered, a quiet investigation that confirmed what the tape had already told us. No dramatic trials, no headlines, just paperwork and apologies delivered too. Late to change the past, Dot. My mother cried when she saw us together. Not the restrained tears I remembered from childhood, but something older and deeper, pulled from a place where guilt and love had lived side by side for years. I wanted to tell you, she said. Every day. I know, I told her, Dot, and for the first time I truly did. Forgiveness didn't arrive all at once. Healing never does, but honesty created space where breathing felt easier. And sometimes that's the beginning of everything. Months later, I returned to the backyard from the photograph. The tire swing was gone. The fence had been replaced. Time had done what time always does, moved forward without asking permission. We stood there together, my sister and I, in a place that once held only ghosts. The evening light stretched long across the grass, warm and forgiving. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed bright, careless, alive in a way the past can never touch. I realized then that the truth hadn't ruined my life, Dot. It had given it back, Dot. Not the simple version, not the safe story wrapped in silence, but the real one, messy, complicated, threaded with loss and love and impossible choices made by people who were trying imperfectly to protect what mattered most. For years, I believed closure meant answers, clean endings, pain neatly resolved. Now I understood something quieter and far more difficult. Closure isn't the absence of wounds. It's the moment you stop bleeding from them, the moment the past becomes something you carry with you instead of something that carries you. I looked at my sister, at the life that had existed beside mine all along, hidden but never truly gone, and felt a kind of peace I had never known how to name. We can't rewrite what happened. We can't return to the people we were before the truth, but we can choose what the truth becomes once it's finally in the light and standing there in the soft gold of an ordinary evening. I understood the simplest and hardest thing of all. Life is not measured by the secrets that break us, but by the love that survives them.